Peace is an internal state, not an external condition. This is the central reason money will never be able to buy it. Money exists in the outer world. Numbers in accounts, objects owned, status displayed, comfort arranged. Peace, however, lives in the inner world. Thoughts, emotions, self-perception, and meaning. You can change everything around a person and still leave their inner landscape untouched. If the mind is restless, fearful, or divided against itself, no amount of wealth can override that noise. A luxurious environment may distract temporarily, but once silence returns, the same unresolved thoughts resurface. Peace requires harmony within oneself, not abundance outside oneself. When people believe money will bring peace, they are often confusing relief with peace. Money can remove certain pressures, unpaid bills, unsafe housing, lack of options. That relief feels powerful, even euphoric, especially after scarcity. But relief is a reduction of pain, not the presence of inner calm. Once those external pressures are handled, the deeper questions arrive. Am I enough? Am I living the right life? Do I trust myself? These questions are not answered by a bank balance. In fact, wealth often strips away excuses. When survival is no longer the problem, meaning becomes unavoidable. That confrontation can be deeply unsettling. Peace comes from alignment between who you are, what you believe, and how you live. Money has no mechanism for creating that alignment. A person can be wealthy and deeply conflicted, living against their values, trapped in roles they no longer believe in, or pursuing goals they inherited rather than chose. The mind senses this misalignment constantly. It shows up as anxiety, irritability, numbness, or chronic dissatisfaction. No purchase can resolve that internal contradiction. Only self-reflection, honesty, and sometimes painful change can do that. There is also the issue of identity. When money becomes a central pillar of self-worth, peace becomes fragile. If your sense of value depends on financial success, then your inner calm is tied to something unstable. Markets fluctuate, businesses fail, status shifts. Even the wealthy know this at some level, which creates a background hum of fear. Peace cannot coexist with constant vigilance. True calm requires a sense of worth that does not rise and fall with external metrics. Money, by its nature, encourages comparison and ranking, which keeps the mind in a state of evaluation rather than rest. Money also cannot teach someone how to be alone with themselves. Many people discover that silence is uncomfortable, not because life is hard, but because their inner world is unresolved. Wealth can fill time with entertainment, stimulation, and distraction, but it cannot make stillness feel safe. In fact, it can delay the moment when a person finally has to sit with their own thoughts. Peace is learned through presence, through facing discomfort without running from it. Money excels at enabling escape, not acceptance. The second keynote follows naturally. Money solves problems, but not inner conflict. Practical problems respond well to financial solutions. A broken car, a medical bill, a lack of education, limited mobility. These are real issues that money can directly address. Dismissing that would be dishonest. However, inner conflict operates by different rules. Inner conflict arises from unresolved emotions, contradictory desires, unexamined beliefs, and unmet psychological needs. These are not transactional problems. You cannot outsource them, purchase shortcuts, or delegate them to others. Inner conflict often involves competing parts of the self. One part wants security, another wants freedom. One wants approval, another wants authenticity. One wants comfort, another wants growth. Money might empower one side temporarily, but it rarely reconciles the tension. In some cases, it intensifies it. Wealth can amplify choices, which means amplifying conflict. More options force more decisions, and more decisions reveal uncertainty about who you are and what you want. Instead of clarity, abundance can create paralysis. There is also the misconception that eliminating external stressors will automatically eliminate internal stress. In reality, internal stress often predates external hardship. Many people who struggle with anxiety or self-criticism do so long before money enters the equation. When financial success arrives, those same patterns simply attach themselves to new concerns. Investments, reputation, expectations, legacy. The mind does not abandon its habits just because circumstances improve. Without inner work, it simply finds new material. Another layer of inner conflict comes from unresolved emotional experiences. Guilt, grief, shame, anger, and regret are not responsive to wealth. A person can afford comfort while still replaying old mistakes at night. They can live in luxury while carrying resentment or unprocessed loss. Money does not rewrite memory or neutralize emotion. In some cases, it even removes the distractions that once kept those feelings at bay. When survival struggles fade, the emotional backlog becomes louder. Money also fails to resolve existential conflict. Questions about purpose, mortality, and meaning are not answered by material success. In fact, wealth can intensify them. When someone achieves what they were told would make them happy and still feels unrest, the dissonance can be disturbing. The question shifts from a "how do I get there?" to a "why am I still empty?" That question cannot be solved externally. It demands introspection, humility, and sometimes a redefinition of success itself. Inner conflict is also relational. Many people struggle with boundaries, trust, and self-expression. Money can complicate relationships rather than heal them. Power imbalances emerge. Motives are questioned. Authenticity becomes harder. The fear of being valued for wealth rather than self can erode connection. These tensions live in the psyche, not the wallet. Without emotional maturity and self-awareness, wealth becomes another stressor layered onto existing relational wounds. Ultimately, peace requires integration. It requires the mind, emotions, and actions to move in the same direction. Money operates on a separate axis. It can support life, ease hardship, and expand opportunity, but it cannot integrate a fractured inner world. That work is slow, personal, and often uncomfortable. It involves sitting with uncertainty, examining beliefs, forgiving oneself, and accepting limits. These processes cannot be rushed or bought. They demand presence, not purchasing power. When people chase money for peace, they are often chasing control. They believe that if they can control enough variables, peace will follow. But inner conflict teaches the opposite lesson. Peace comes from accepting what cannot be controlled, including parts of oneself. Money thrives on control. Peace thrives on acceptance. That fundamental difference ensures that one can never substitute for the other. Wealth cannot silence self-doubt because self-doubt is not born from lack, but from perception. It is rooted in how a person sees themselves, how they interpret their worth, and how they relate to expectations, both internal and external. Money can elevate status, visibility, and power, but it does not automatically rewire the inner narrative that questions adequacy or belonging. A person who doubts themselves before wealth often carries that same doubt into wealth, only now it has a larger stage on which to perform. Success does not erase insecurity, it often exposes it. Self-doubt feeds on comparison, and wealth intensifies comparison rather than dissolving it. As financial status rises, so does proximity to others who appear more successful, more influential, or more accomplished. The reference group shifts upward, keeping the feeling of a not enough alive. Fear of loss reveals a deeper truth. Attachment is the source of unrest. Wealth increases attachment by increasing identification with what one owns and achieves. When identity becomes entangled with possessions or status, losing them feels like losing oneself. The mind clings tighter, fearing collapse. No amount of money can resolve this fear because it is not about money at all. It is about attachment and identity. Both self-doubt and fear of loss point to the same conclusion. Peace depends on inner stability, not external accumulation. Without a grounded sense of self, wealth amplifies insecurity. Without acceptance of impermanence, wealth amplifies fear. Money magnifies what already exists inside. If there is unrest, it grows louder. If there is fear, it becomes more complex. Peace is not found by adding more, but by needing less internally. More money often means more responsibility, and responsibility carries weight that cannot be set down easily. As wealth increases, so do obligations. Employees to pay, families to support, investments to manage, reputations to protect. Each new level of financial success introduces systems that must be maintained. These systems demand attention, decision-making, and constant oversight. While money is often imagined as freedom, in practice it frequently binds people to complex structures that depend on their continued involvement. Peace requires mental spaciousness, but responsibility crowds the mind. Responsibility does not end when the workday ends. It follows people into their private moments. Decisions linger. Consequences loom. The awareness that others are affected by one's choices creates a persistent sense of pressure. Even positive responsibilities, such as providing opportunities or stability for others, can become heavy when it leaves no room for rest. The mind remains engaged, alert, and burdened. Wealth does not grant permission to disengage, it often removes that permission. There is also the moral dimension of responsibility. With greater resources comes greater awareness of inequality, expectation, and obligation. Questions arise. Am I doing enough? Am I being fair? Should I give more, risk more, help more? These questions do not have clear answers. They live in gray areas that stir guilt, doubt, and internal debate. Money increases the number of ethical decisions a person must face, and ethical ambiguity rarely brings peace. Responsibility also creates fear of failure. When livelihoods, families, or institutions depend on one person's success, mistakes feel catastrophic. This raises the emotional stakes of every choice. Risk becomes stressful rather than exciting. Even success can feel fragile because it must be repeated to sustain the system. Peace thrives in environments where failure is survivable. Wealth often turns failure into a threat to identity and security, making calm harder to access. The sixth keynote follows closely. Financial success can increase anxiety. Anxiety thrives on anticipation, and wealth expands the future horizon. More assets mean more future scenarios to manage, protect, and optimize. The mind becomes preoccupied with projections, returns, risks, trends, outcomes. Instead of being present, attention is pulled forward into hypothetical futures. Anxiety is rarely about what is happening now. It is about what might happen. Money feeds that loop. Financial success also raises the standard of living, which raises the cost of maintaining it. Once accustomed to comfort, the thought of losing it can feel unbearable. This creates a baseline anxiety, even in stable conditions. The mind quietly asks, so what if this ends? The more someone has adapted to abundance, the more threatening scarcity feels. Anxiety grows not from lack, but from the fear of returning to it. There is also social anxiety tied to success. Wealth changes how people are perceived and treated. Expectations shift, judgment intensifies, privacy diminishes. The pressure to appear competent, generous, and composed at all times can be exhausting. Every interaction carries an unspoken evaluation. The wealthy may feel they are constantly being watched, measured, or compared. This awareness keeps the nervous system tense, even in safe environments. Financial anxiety is also fueled by uncertainty. Markets are unpredictable. Systems are complex. No amount of intelligence or effort can guarantee outcomes. Yet success often creates the illusion that control is possible if one just works harder or plans better. When reality inevitably resists that illusion, anxiety fills the gap. Peace requires acceptance of uncertainty, but financial systems reward the opposite mindset: constant optimization and vigilance. Anxiety can also grow from isolation. As responsibilities increase and schedules tighten, time for genuine connection often shrinks. Without spaces to be unguarded, the mind has nowhere to release tension. Anxiety accumulates in silence. Wealth may provide access to people, but not necessarily to understanding or empathy. Without emotional grounding, success becomes a lonely experience, and loneliness amplifies anxiety. Both responsibility and anxiety reveal a deeper contradiction in the pursuit of money for peace. The very structures that create financial success demand ongoing engagement, attention, and worry. They pull the mind outward into management and anticipation, away from stillness and presence. Peace requires the ability to let go, to trust, and to rest. Wealth, by default, trains the opposite skills. Unless consciously counterbalanced, it becomes a source of mental strain rather than calm. Ultimately, responsibility and anxiety are not flaws of money itself, but of the belief that accumulation leads to inner ease. When peace is postponed until after success, it often never arrives. Each milestone brings new duties and new fears. Without inner boundaries and clarity, wealth becomes an amplifier of pressure. Peace does not come from having more to manage, but from knowing what can be released.